This week on the Sports Initiative podcast, I sit down with sporting director and head coach of Fort Wayne FC, Mike Avery. He discusses the process of building a football club from its infancy, the effect of individualization on professional sport, and how he assesses character and builds team chemistry when recruiting new players. As always, if you enjoy this podcast, please make sure you share it with friends and family. I hope you enjoy. Good. So, Mike, I know we had a nice catch up off air there, but for everyone who's just joined us, how are things in your world? Are you all good?
Yeah, no, I'm doing really well, thank you. And it's a pleasure to be on with you. My morning, it's not your morning, but my morning. And yeah, so I'm excited to have a chat.
Yeah, no, it should be really good. As I said, time difference on this one isn't too bad. I've been on some other ones where I'm up at about 11:30 at night trying to do a podcast whilst not upsetting my wife too much. But this one's only 10 to 5 at the minute, so we're all good on the time difference time frame. For people that maybe don't know you, don't know your story, can you just explain to us who you are and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, sure. My name is Mike Avery. I'm currently, my main job is I'm the sporting director and head coach for Fort Wayne FC, which is a USL2 league club. So that's in the fourth tier of the US soccer's pyramid, the highest amateur level that you could have. Basically, it's a final step for guys who will be going professional. Many of them are coming out of the US college system. So I think in the last year's draft of the MLS teams, I think 70 out of 100 came out of the USL2. They played in their summer, so it's a time for them while school's out of session in the summer to keep playing at a high level and organized level. Our club is slightly different because we are planning to move up to the full professional level in another year or two to the USL League One level. So the history of our club, I'll give it to you just really quickly, but we're about 4 years old. There's a really famous player in the States named DeMarcus Beasley, who U.S. national team legend, was in the Hall of Fame, had an incredible career, played over in Europe, played for Man City, played for PSV, had a real long and successful career. So when he finally retired, his dream was to put a low league professional club in his hometown. And he happens to be from Fort Wayne, Indiana. And so that's what we've been doing. We've been building out a professional club. So while we're playing currently at this USL League Two level, really all the work that we're doing is to prop the club up. So in another year or two, we can make that jump to League One. So it's been really fun. We're building a stadium. Eventually we'll build out an academy and really try and put a proper low league club into place. And so that's been really fun. So I've been doing this now. I'll be in my fourth year with the team. So I coach the team, the first team. I focus pretty much on the senior team, that what happens on the field. So I identify players, I recruit the players, I coach the players, and then also help out in the club and all the other areas that I can, hire the technical staff and oversee that staff as well. We're trying to operate, even though we're not technically a professional club, we're trying to be the most professional club that we can be now, so that when we make the next step, we don't have to start all over again. So we're just trying to put all the systems in place now. So that's my primary job, is that it's gone really well. We've gone from being a startup club to being one of the better clubs in the country pretty quickly. And so we're excited about the direction that we're going, and really excited about taking the next step when that finally comes, because it feels like a long time coming with a lot of work that's gone in behind it, even though it's only been a few years. On the side, I have my little side hustle, I guess is what you'd call it. So I have a company that's really just me. I'm a company of one that called Center Circle Influencers. And so I work in the athletics space with mostly university teams. I guess you would call it the team building space. I'm not a sports psychologist, so I don't push myself off as that. But I am someone who has spent, I'm 55 years old right now. I think I joined my first football team when I was 4 years old. So I've been on a soccer team every day of my life for the last 51 years. So that's a lot of years of playing and then coaching at a lot of different levels in a lot of different places around the world. And so I have a lot of practical experience that I think comes across as helpful to coaches, administrators, athletes, and teams, just to, I guess, help them frame the experience that they're going through. I don't know if it's the same around the world, but I will tell you that in the United States, and particularly at the higher levels of university sport, it's become very professional very fast. There's, it used to be about scholarship and education and one more extension of your education. And now it's like full on pro sports with hiring and firing and NIL money, which is name, image, and likeness. So athletes are trading out their image for sponsorship deals, and the whole thing has just gone off the rails. And so I'm trying to be a counterbalance in some ways to that, to remind people of what's important in sport, and why we all got into it when we first started. I guess and I, not to competitive excellence is really important to me too. Like, I work in a job where if I don't win enough games, I have to find another job. So I understand the ramifications of not winning, but I don't think it's the point of what we're doing. I think it's a byproduct of doing other things, and it's really about the relationships that you build and the people that we become along the way. And so in my side business, I spend a lot of time in that area as well.
So your mention around NIL is very apt, because our last release, but prior to you, is an individual called Ben Chase, who is the NIL strategy something. I want to say advisor, but I think is it more finger than that, for Florida Gators. And he was
Okay.
talking to us all
Yeah.
about how, it's become professionalized and what that means in collegiate sports. So yeah, I can completely understand where you're coming from in that aspect. Probably in the UK, I wouldn't say our university system is overly professionalized. I would say that we've managed to keep that relatively amateurish, and part of that is because obviously the main sport over here is football, and if
Yeah.
you're playing university football, whilst you can do it whilst getting education, it probably means you've come out of a professional club, so you're maybe exploring a different avenue.
Yes.
There are some Olympians and stuff that train, but that would be the main one. So I think that where we see it more is in the academy system, where you have under nines that are signed to academies
Mm.
and then are training 3 nights a week plus a game at the weekend. There are some stories I'm hearing from friends of mine at the minute where they'll train 2 or 3 nights a week and then play double weekends as well, as they play Saturday and Sunday. So if you can imagine that for a boy who's in the under nines, he's still
Yeah.
only 8. He might be a Q4. There is he's an August born, but he's traveling 5 days a week to go and play football. So I'd say that's probably where more of our professionalism comes. And there is a massive debate at the moment as to I guess the efficacy of it. So should we
Yeah.
be allowing a level of
It's a
childhood or
fascinating.
not?
I think it's a fascinating conversation. And look, you're younger than I am, but when you started playing, you didn't start playing because you were trying to make money off of your image, or you started playing because your friends were playing and you loved it, and it became kind of your circle. And I don't know why I fell in love with the game as a child, but I did. And I certainly don't know why the game decided to love me back, but thank God that it did. And so I've been on this journey in it the whole time. But it felt like when I was growing up, like the point of being in the team was just to be in the team. That was the point. Like, my best friends in the world are teammates of mine from 35 years ago when I was in college. They're still my best friends in the world. There was something in that time that was transformational for me. But now we look at it all as a transaction. It's, how do I get, the point of being in the team seems to be just to find a better team. And I understand there's a business side to it. I'm not saying that those two can't exist at the same time, but I feel like we've gone too far in one direction. You used to want to say, as an employer, so you take yourself out of the sport, if you were just going to hire somebody, you would say, let me hire a former athlete. Why? Because they learned how to be cooperative and how to pursue hard things and how to suffer through things and keep going, right? Is that what we're teaching them anymore? Because now what we teach them is that when you don't make the team, you don't stay and fight for your job. You just grab your ball and go find another team. And is that translating now into the workforce? I think it probably is. You hear stories now of mom going with the son to the first job interview and complaining to the employer when they don't get hired. It blows my mind when I say that out loud. but you see it now. You see it when moms and dads that are storming up the sidelines of the 8-year-old child that you talked about, demanding more because we haven't recognized the brilliance in their son that's so obviously there on the field. It's it's gone crazy, and I'm afraid that we're going to lose it because I love it so much.
I've got two thoughts on this. I blame it on two different areas, if you like. I think the first one is where we've had this constant give culture. So we give people more and more and more and more. They then demand more and more and more. And ultimately, resources run out at some point, or people put stakes in the ground and go, no, we're not willing to do that. But the person who is willing to flex on it and do it is then gets, I'm going to use inverted commas for anyone just listening, in the better players they then
Mm-hmm.
win and you have that knock-on effect. So I think there's an element of that for sure, which then feeds into social media and all that type of stuff. And I'm going to name it, but I blame LeBron James a bit for this
Yeah,
because what I've noticed over the last how many years is I've seen people across the world stop supporting teams and support an individual. And I feel like when LeBron made that jump from maybe Cleveland to Miami, he took some LeBron fans with him and then
yeah,
took them back to Cleveland and took them to the Lakers. And I've seen it now in, football with Ronaldo. They're not Man United fans, and Ronaldo's good to have at the club. Ronaldo's the person, and they're going to follow him around wherever he goes. So I feel like that um, highlight of an individual within the team and the individualization, I guess the brand and all that type of bit in it has then led to the less of the team aspect and more of the, what can the individual get, what brands can we get, and it's led to more of a thing. And listen, I know that could have started from MJ when he was doing his Nike
yeah, yeah, yeah,
stuff and all of
sure,
that, but
sure.
I think that that's probably where I saw it more. I saw the Bulls fans loved MJ, but they didn't just go and support him. Like when he went to the Wizards, they didn't go, "Oh, I'm
Yeah,
just going to go support the Wizards now." Where
yeah,
LeBron, I kind of saw that and was like, "Okay, that's an interesting take." But
yeah. And I guess that's the point for me really is that if we're talking about professional sports at the higher levels, when it's a $1 billion industry and there's people are getting paid all this money, and it's a different thing than when we're talking about my 16-year-old son who's playing AAU basketball right now, trying, you know what I mean? But we've got to create an Instagram account for him so that he can get recruited. But you know, what we're chasing, I don't think is realistic for, we're talking about LeBron James is the point one of the point one of the point one. He's he sets the standard. He's not one of the many. He's the elite. But we all chase it, because they're in the entertainment business, and I get the money that they make. I mean, nobody's complaining when Coldplay fills the stadium or Taylor Swift sells out the stadium, that they make a lot of money. So it's an interesting conversation. And I guess for me, when I have a chance to go in and talk with athletes and teams and coaches, just to try and remind them, even if it's the old guy shouting into the wind at night, like, hey, let's remember the point of all this, because what you're saying, not you, but what people are saying is that the 13th player on the team just really doesn't matter
yeah,
because they're not the one that's bringing in the revenue or drawing the eyeballs to the social media posts. And I'm saying no, all of it matters. All of them matter because we're all learning these things through it. Because again, the relationships that we build through the sport that we're fortunate to play, that's what lasts. You know that. I mean, you have friends all over your country that you met at this age playing in this team or played against them in that team, and those are the relationships that last. That's the beauty of the game, is that we get a chance to hang out with people from literally all over the world. We had 30 guys on our roster. I think we had 22 different birth countries in the locker room.
yeah,
It's
and
amazing.
and as you said, that's why you originally play is to kind of make friends. Is
Exactly it.
I get the wanting to perform side of it, but I think there's
Yeah.
also
And,
a
and, and
person.
again, I think actually what we miss though, because I'm not like kumbaya as well. I don't think we just sit around and hold hands and hope that we win a game. And if we don't, that's fine. We'll go grab a Happy Meal at McDonald's. That's not what I'm saying either, because I am in a competitive industry where we have to be successful. But I think, when you dig into it, like where does confidence come from? The player, where does that confidence come from to perform on that stage? Well, it comes from preparation. It comes from their natural God-given talent. It comes from their experiences, but it also comes from the connection that they feel to the people that they're in with.
Mm.
Confidence comes from there. If you know that no matter what you do on the field, I still got your back because you're my teammate and you're my friend and we have a relationship together, it's going to give you the confidence to go and try and express yourself a little bit more.
And not fearing failure as much, potentially.
Exactly. So I think success actually comes from the connections that we build as well. So if we're staying intentional about how we build them, I think that we really are helping ourselves be competitive on the other end as well.
So, in terms of your, obviously, you mentioned earlier on, kind of you started this project or you came onto this project relatively early on. How did you get approached about it,
Yeah.
how did you find it? And then from your perspective, what drew you to say yes? Because you mentioned the connection piece there. There must have been something that you'd seen in the organization to go, actually, yeah, this is something that I would love to be part of the building
Yeah.
process with.
Yeah. So I spent the first 30 years almost coaching in the university setting, so in college soccer. And so my background is really in college sports. Um, and then in 2019, I'd spent 13 years at the university here in town where I live, Valparaiso University. My wife's the head volleyball coach, so we had a really interesting thing going where we could both coach in the same place and raise our family here. And things are going great. And then I got called into a meeting one day, and 5 minutes later, I didn't have a job anymore. They dropped the sport completely. Some budget cuts came to the university, so they picked two men's sports, tennis, and then men's soccer, and they cut the program. And so things are going well, and you've turned down other opportunities to move up and job and all that you do because you're planning, and we're kind of thriving at the moment, and then life just kind of rocks you on its side a little bit with no warning. So it was a difficult time, and it was right on the maybe a month before, 2 months before COVID hit. So there was kind of a double whammy there as well. So you and I talked off air before. The day that they dropped the program that I was coaching, I got offered other college soccer jobs, but we would have had to have moved, and we didn't want to move. And so I got offered then that afternoon, literally the same afternoon, an opportunity to coach this brand new team, Fort Wayne FC. At the time, it was a part-time job, and I just viewed it in my mind as just a little bridge to get me over the next few months till I figured out what was going to be next. And then so I got involved. The first season we didn't play because COVID won the first season, so we didn't have a season at all. And then a year later, we played that first summer, and then they had some ownership changes. DeMarcus Beasley got involved because he wasn't involved in the very initial time that I was there. And things kind of lined up where now we've got a path to move into this next step into the professional level. And so things have really changed from a structure. Now I'm full time with the club. I've got some resources behind me to help build the team. And so it's been really a fun project. And there's something in my personality. I like being the pioneer kind of job where you're building something. It will be fun someday. Every coaching job I've ever had in my life has been a rebuild, or you're taking over a team that's struggling at the moment. Jobs come open for one of a couple of reasons. Either the coach has done really well and has moved up, or they haven't done so well and he's been moved on. And so I've been taking over these kind of rebuild situations, and I like it. I think it's a fun challenge. It would be fun, I think, to maybe hop into the really good team and see if you can manage that one time and see how that goes. But this has been really exciting. When you feel the direction and you see the fans, and you walk through town, and all of a sudden you see kids wearing the jersey of the team, and all of these things are brand new. You're hitting milestones all the time that are brand new for the club. And so that's been really fun, and it's been rewarding. And I'm excited that hopefully in the next few years we can take that next step, and I can still be a part of it and see how that goes as well.
And so when you're going into a new project like this, I'd imagine one of the key things is to, with the people that are already on board, kind of create an identity. Now, I appreciate that in COVID, that's particularly challenging because you can't spend time with anyone or whatnot. But off the back end of that, you're probably in a position to start implementing those things. So how did you go around doing that, and how much of it was kind of your personal preference of how you think people and teams succeed, to how much of it was a town identity, to how much was an
Yeah,
ownership identity?
yeah.
What did that look like?
I think all of those things are important. I think the driving force is probably my opinion, along with Demarcus Beasley's opinion. He's very involved. He's the president of football operations and one of the owners, but also involved on the day to day. And so we talk long, almost daily about, how we want to play, how we want to build the club. He has been in some of the biggest clubs around the world, so he's got a very firm idea of what a club should and could look like, which, and he comes at it from the player's perspective. So we're very much a player centric club. We try and, we feel like they're the talent, they're the band, we're trying to do everything we can to put them in the best situation to be successful. And for us, success means maybe to move them on to higher levels, higher club. That's going to be us. We're not in a market that's big enough we don't have aspirations to become an MLS team down the road, or we're just not in a big enough city for that. We're going to be, a lower league, smaller market, hopefully that's successful, that could win in the league that we're in, but also push players to higher levels. That's going to be what our goal is. But how we play from a style standpoint, how we treat the players, how we treat each other within the club. And right now we're kind of a mixture. We have some full-time employees, but a lot of what we do is a volunteer base. Still, people that are, students that are doing internship work over the summer for their colleges, or people from the community that are volunteering their time. And we're trying to, like you alluded to, represent a very hardworking, blue-collar, diverse city in the middle of the United States. Demarcus himself is a great story because he's a young black kid that grew up playing a sport that nobody played in a neighborhood where nobody played it, and made it to the highest stages in the world. Is the next Demarcus Beasley in Indiana still? Can we find that player? Can we give him an environment to be successful? Because we're still introducing the game to people that have never really played it in the inner cities of some of the cities here in Indiana. So it's been a really fun project to do. But again, all of those things matter, and we're trying the best that we can to forge an identity. And the way that it most obviously comes out is that if you turn on a game of ours, you'll say, oh, there's Fort Wayne playing, because you can tell by the way that we're playing. And so we're trying to hold true to the style of play that represents maybe the underlying culture that's in the club.
Okay, so two questions off the back of that. Firstly, with that question in mind, what would, if I did turn on the TV, what would you hope that I would see from a playing perspective? And then the second one, you mentioned about being player centric. What type of initiatives or programs have you got in place to really align to that ideology?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll take the second one part first. But in terms of being player centric, first of all, we're trying to provide them with all of the resources that we can. And look, we're at a level where we're not providing them with every single thing that they can get. But comparative to other teams in our league, where they stay in terms of housing, how we travel, how they eat, the type of training that we expose them to, having sports performance coach, having an athletic trainer, having a massage therapist, having all of the different pieces that maybe seem like just a little extras. We try and put them in place. We want to be them to be in a situation where they can athletically perform at their best all the time, right? Beyond that, though, we try and dig in with them and ask them and talk to them, have conversation with them about what's important to you. Is there a cause that you support? Is there, one of our pillars as a club is our community outreach, and we want to be not just visible in the community because we want people to come to our games and fill the stands. We actually want to be part of a community, and so we have guys that come from these incredible stories from all over the world. That's the game that we play. We play the world's game, and so what's important to them, and then how can we get them in touch with or support them through initiatives. So we have a program that called Fort Wayne FC Cares, which is our community outreach arm. And so there's not a day that goes by during our season where you don't find two, three, four, five of the guys at an event that's supporting issues that matter to them, and that's really important to us. We want to be, we want them to have a voice. We want them to figure out, because they're still young guys that we're dealing with. They're still figuring out sometimes what's important to them. But rather than say, okay, look, you're going to go to this community service event today, we ask them, what do you want to get involved with? What, and then we try and partner with them to make a difference in the community in which we live. So that's really, really important to us.
Where does that community give back come from? Because I look at the UK based teams, and listen, they do outreach programs. I'm not pretending that they don't, but I've been to them before as a scholar, where we went into a school and did it, and I would say majority of the lads didn't want to be there. I've seen videos of people going into these schools, and you can sense that some of the time they don't want to be there. But when I look at the US initiatives, it seems far more it's genuine sounds harsh, but it seems far more genuine. They seem more
Mm.
engaged with it, and you get people doing camps back in their hometowns, or people will go to do a particular soup kitchen that is their aunt's favorite place. It seems like a real integral part of a lot of sports. Like NBA Cares obviously has their version.
Yeah,
I think the NFL have got a specialist award. I can't remember the name of the person,
yeah.
but for people that have done good things in their community, and during the Super Bowl it comes up and shows you what they do. It seems such an integral part of like the foundations of sports in the US. Why is that?
That's a great question. I don't know why it is, but I would agree with you to an extent, because I'm sure that if you come into one of our events too, there's going to be one of the guys that doesn't really want to be there too. You know what I mean? That, and we try and vet that a bit and don't force them. You know what I mean? We're not requiring that of them, because, I want it to be more of an event of them sharing their time and their talents and their gifts. And many of our guys, maybe it's because we have gone incredibly diverse in our makeup as a team. Um, Maybe that's, guys come from pretty compelling stories from around the world, and so if you grew up in a village and you didn't have much, and then all of a sudden you have some things and you have a chance to go give back to the community that supports you, I think you're maybe a little bit more willing to do it. The challenge that we run into, to be quite honest with you, is what I call the spoiled rotten American kids, because the kids who grew up in maybe difficult circumstances or more compelling circumstances, they're desperate to come and give back. Where the kid who comes from a gated community 3-car garage that pulls up in a nicer car than the coaching staff for training, they're not always as interested. And so we're trying to encourage them to spend some times around their teammates and learn from them, and then see the value in giving back. And that's not to paint everybody with the same brush, because everybody's different, but we do run into that sometimes, the entitlement culture that you find everywhere sometimes. But we try and gauge against it. And really part of the recruiting process for the team, there's a filter there for that. When I'm talking to you about coming to play for us, part of what I'm talking about is not only where I see you playing and how I see you fitting into the setup, but these are some things that are important to the club as well. Is that interesting to you too? Because we're going to be out and about in the community, and we'd like our guys to be supportive of that. So,
Yeah, I think what's really interesting you said there was around the stories. Everyone has their own story. Now, I I'm an avid football fan, but I wouldn't know how many of the stories of players in the Premier League that I actually know.
yeah,
If you said to me, I'm a Spurs fan, for example, Mickey van der Ven, outside knowing that he's Dutch and came from Wolfsburg, I wouldn't know that much about
yeah,
him as an individual. Basuma would be the same. So maybe one of the poorer jobs that we do is actually understanding the narrative and storytelling element for someone, to then be able to figure out where they would want to give back, because
yeah, yeah,
everyone would in
yeah.
some
You know,
capacity.
it,
Like if you've
It's
lost a
interesting,
parent, for example, you'd
right?
probably be more inclined to go and help a charity for single parents.
Yes.
Now that would have happened to Premier League footballers, but I'm not aware of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
maybe it's a bit around
it's
that.
interesting. In our team, we have our season is interesting in so many ways because it's like something that might happen in a normal 10 or 11th month season. We have it all gets squeezed into 2 months or 3 months. It's a really everything's pushed on fast forward. So you're going through everything that a team goes through, but on hyper speed because it's just a short season. Um, and there's always a game, so you almost never get chances to train because it's just match after match after match. It's a crazy sprint of a season, um, but we try and build a team during that time. So you have guys who have never played together. They come from all over the country. Their backgrounds might be from all over the world, and they come into Fort Wayne, which is not maybe the most exotic locale to go spend your summer in, but they're focused because they know that we can help them get to the next step. Um, but we try and make it feel like you're in a proper team. And so we do what we call every day. I do an exercise with them every day called the hot seat, which is a real simple activity. So every single day, one of the players will come up in front of the locker room and I'll ask them a series of 5 H questions. Who's a hero in your life and why? What's a hardship that you've been through, but you got through it? What's a highlight that you want to share with us? Um, what's a headache? Not a hardship, but just a nag, something on your mind right now that you're going through. And then the last question is, what's a hope? What are you excited about? And the guys just start talking about themselves, right? And we learn in this time. The last year I told you we had 22 different birth countries, and we had like 17 guys who did not have a father on the team. And that's maybe a common thing around the world, in some cultures more than others because of various reasons. Our American kids are sitting there thinking, holy cow, what is going on here? And it just opens their eyes. And we have other kids that tell even harder stories about losing both their parents at like young ages and then being taken in by a coach in the village and saying, now your responsibility in life is to make it so you can give back to these people that here that supported you when your family passed, right? So you're playing with this guy who's kind of a jerk on the field, kind of hard to deal with, especially when the game gets tough and he gets like tries to take all this responsibility on himself. And then you learn what his background is a little bit. And it maybe doesn't make it easier to play with him, but maybe it makes you understand him a little bit better, and I think those things are really valuable in building out the team. And when you learn about each other and what other people have gone through, maybe sometimes you're learning how fortunate you are too. I do think it helps you to open up your worldview and to say, look, how do I use what I have to give back a little bit?
And how do you manage that as a coach? Because I think that's an amazing initiative. But what I would be conscious of, both as a individual, if I was the one being asked the questions, but also if I was the coach in your position who's getting people to talk about themselves, is the vulnerability side naturally I say, particularly for men, isn't one that you're going to want to necessarily come out with, particularly in what can be seen as quite a competitive environment.
Yeah,
And if there's three goalkeepers in your squad and one of them gives you a bit of an insight of something you can get at them with, they might not want to say that. And naturally, there'd be an element of ribbing that could come up. So you might be like, get called a particular name because of
yeah,
something, or
yeah,
if say for example your parents aren't there, you might start getting called it blindside from Michael, and that a
yeah.
random nickname that could come up. So how do you manage that as a coach in that space to show that we want the vulnerability and actually the power in it for us as a group, with people being really candid and honest, and how this is going to help both us connect, but also help you perform, because that's ultimately what people want to do.
Yeah. Well, I do think that, it's a process because, if you go into a team that you've never met before and say, all right, hey, Michael, hop up, tell me about the hard thing that you've been through. Like you said, people are very hesitant to share things, right? And so what we try and do, first of all, is model it. So I'll talk very openly with them about me and about my life and my background. Our coaching staff will do the same. We try and create a culture of belonging where people feel that they're allowed to be who they are, right? Um, It's interesting in American sports. You said you follow American sports. So in the NFL, for example, the Seattle Seahawks, the NFL athletes are the biggest, fastest, toughest, and typically come from the hardest backgrounds in America, right? And they're bringing in somebody like, Brene Brown, who's talking about vulnerability with them in the NFL. They're recognizing at that level the strength that comes from that kind of conversation. It's not us just inventing this stuff. I mean, these are, when I was playing, if you had gone into the locker room and said, okay, guys, we're going to do yoga, right? Every single person would have laughed the person out the room, and you know what I mean? And now every team's got a yoga instructor on it. So I think the athlete today is far more in tune with the things that are happening around the world in sports because everybody's looking for that little edge. And I think this area right here, connection via authentic vulnerability, is a real thing that I think people are recognizing there's strength in that. And again, it doesn't make it easy. And I still don't want to go I don't go run and tell everybody my deepest, darkest secrets all the time. That's not what I'm saying, because oversharing without context is just drama, and nobody wants drama. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about authentic connection. And it's interesting because when somebody in the room is brave enough to share something pretty deep, wait until you hear the next two or three in a row after that. It's like it opens this floodgate of it's okay for us to go ahead and talk about some things because look, at the end of the day, we're in this thing together. We're all we got is each other, and that's it. And teams that are built on that kind of trust are really powerful teams.
And there must be a point at which you kind of know now's the time to try and strike the iron on this.
Yeah.
What is that sense as you get? Is that something innate to you, or can you begin to see dialogues? Like, yeah, what are some of
And
the
again,
green flags?
I have a unique opportunity in a way because I basically build a team for 9 months that plays for 3 months. You know what I mean? So there's so much that goes on before they actually get together with me. And I'm trying to, as quickly as we identified them as a player that we want, we've kind of vetted the, not character, that's not really the right word, but their personality, that they're interested in the things that we're offering, that there's a fit and alignment there. Um, I try and start building relationships with them and preparing them for what we're going to do over the summer because again, it can be a very intimidating environment to go into if you're not comfortable in that world, and it's not we're not running, rehab sessions, you know what I mean? Like it's not, we're not in counseling. We're just trying to honestly get to know each other past what the superficial thing might be. And it's interesting. We have this time in training. Our guys, we don't have our own facility just yet, so we borrow one from a university just now. And so the guys have to be, there's a bridge that leads in, and they have to be across the bridge by 9 in the morning, and then we start training at 9:30. So they got like a 30-minute time that they can see the physio, they can stretch, play a little rondo, soccer, tennis. It's their time to get ready, right? And so I stand there during that time, and my eyes are on. It's like the most important 30 minutes for me because I know in 30 minutes, like who's not connected to the team, you know, Michael's over by himself, sitting on a bench by himself, or he's not joined the big rondo that's become like 19 against 2. You know what I mean? And everybody's having a laugh. And I know how good we're going to be on the day by how loud and funny that morning 30 minutes is. And I can watch this stuff. And it's funny because at the beginning of the summer, there were little pockets, 2, 3 guys together in little pockets. And then by the end of the summer, it's like, I don't know, we had 30, it's 28 against 2 in a massive rondo that's a big laugh. You know what I mean? And you just watch every day, more guys get in the circle, more guys get in the circle, more guys get in the circle. And to me, that's an indicator that the team is coming together. You know, they kind of get over the roles, responsibility, who starts and who come off the bench and who's not in the squad. And, those things are all part of it as well. But I think that bringing the team together is an art as much as it is a science, and I think it's a feel.
Yeah, I mean, on that, I know that Ange did an interview last year, and I'm going to use Tottenham rhetoric here for everyone that
Yeah,
listens. But one of the things he mentioned was around he will forsake the talent of a player for the character of a player.
Yeah.
because the characters, all you need is one or two in your environment that will then, poison you from the inside out. So he'd always forsake a little bit of talent for
Yeah.
I guess, the greater good, if you like. I assume from what you're saying there, that's quite similar in terms of the type of profile of players that you're going
Yeah. Yeah.
after.
And I think that the the difference, I guess, between who would consider like the easy to recognize top talent and then the next guy below that, it's probably just a slight degree of variation. You know what I mean? I think you can find enough good players with great attitudes and attitude again, it's a, I like the flair. I like the guys that challenge the guy. You know what I mean? I'm not looking for cookie cutter yes men to come into the team. I like guys that are tough and have been around the block a little bit in life because they win you games. Let's not make any mistake about it. But I also like guys who are open and willing to share the experience with other people. And so for me, that's the part that, and I don't care if we're giving a kid his fifth chance, not never mind his second chance. He could be on his 100th chance. Like we all need extra opportunities. And I'm not somebody who thinks I can go and save everybody because sometimes coaches get into this role that, oh, I'll be the one that changes him. But if somebody demonstrates over time that they are not a fit for us, it's my least favorite part of coaching is to let them go, but I will let them go. I'm not afraid of it.
So where's the gold mine in discerning that? Because you're going to spend a lot of time recruiting. You're obviously going to see what you see on the film. You're going to do
Yeah.
your due diligence in terms of other coaches and coaching staff. Ultimately, a player will react different in every environment to a, not all the time, but there's going to be different behaviors that you'll see. Maybe if an environment's particularly negative, he might be more negative than his baseline normally is, and vice versa. But when you're sat there with the player or with the player and the parents, how are you discerning from that conversation when you're on a recruiting trip whether one, what he's saying to you is truthful, because obviously that's a part of it, but the authenticity and genuine nature to go, yeah, what he's saying aligns with the values that I know I want. How are you assessing that?
Yeah, and I would guess that there's not a checklist, I guess, the way I would answer that. I think it's a feel, but I think I think when you're in conversation with somebody and there's a real connection going on, I think you can sense it. I think there's if someone's just blowing smoke at me, I think I can pick that up. My bullshit detector's pretty strong, I believe. Um, and I'm not interested in wasting too much time on players where I don't feel my own personal connection. Because at the end of the day, you know, I'm going to be there longer than they are. It's this is my job, just not for this season, but for the next one as well. Hopefully, in the next one after that. And so I've got to do my. I'm the gatekeeper in some ways. I think sometimes when we're recruiting, we get into the mode of selling. I'm trying to sell good players on what we have to offer, and I don't think that's it. I think I'm selecting. I think I have a good thing to offer. I think they need to prove to me that they're a good fit. And there's not a magic phrase or a magic word that gets them entry. I think it's just a feeling that I have, and then a lot of watching. Watching when they know I'm watching when they don't know that I'm watching. And You try hard not to mistake passion. Like I get excited too. I can give a referee a go. Like I can yell and get excited as well. Um, so not just the passionate part, but I really just how people respond to them, I guess, is the biggest thing is, you know, how do they treat their teammate when the teammates missed a sitter? How is it a quick yell and they're onto it? Is it a pat? Is it a touch? Is it because there's so many different ways to go about it. But at the end of the day, we use the term fit. You're trying to find guys who are the right fit for you. And I use fit as an acronym, FIT, finding the ideal teammate. So if I just think in my head, what does the ideal teammate look like? Well, I want him to be good. So talent is the easy one. I want him to be a good player. But what other things are important to me? And finding, and I want people that are honest and that I can count on. They're loyal and trustworthy, and I want to be the same for them. That's what we're looking for: is to build a team of guys who you want to spend time with on and off the field because like it or lump it, that's what you do. You're with each other all the time. and so you want to try and enjoy that time.
Yeah, what's really flagged up on what you just said to me there is how teammates react to them. That's the bit that's resonating with me now, because you will get certain teammates that might be particularly explosive in the language that they use or the way that
Yeah,
they act with people, but the teammates will give you an indication whether they feel like that's coming from a place of
yeah,
standards and care, or whether they feel that that's just a berating because that's what he does
yeah,
or she does. So the
yeah,
bit that's really resonating with me there is actually how do the teammates respond to what's being said?
yeah.
And if you pick out one interaction, that's not going to help. But the 15, 16 other players, that gives you an indication as to what actually
hundred
goes on
percent. Because
behind the
like
scene.
I don't think the athletes, especially when they don't have a dog in the fight, you're not there recruiting all of them. You're there recruiting one or two of them, right, from a game.
Mm.
Um, they're going to show you honestly what they think about that player just in how they respond to him. They're not trying to put on a show for you. They don't even know you're there half the time. And so I think that those interactions of how they're received, because look, I mean, I played with guys who have the worst qualities ever that I love with all my heart, because those qualities are just who they are. They come from a place of real honesty.
But that's what I mean. You can tolerate it
For
as a
sure.
teammate because you know the person behind it.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I can tolerate the little bit of edge or
for
directness
sure.
if I
Yeah,
know that that individual maybe later down the line goes, listen, I overstepped the mark. I shouldn't have done it in that way, or I just needed the urgency there. What people won't tolerate is if that's barragement as an excuse or something like that,
yeah,
or they exhibit bad behaviors all the time. So that's the bit that is really interesting for me. And what I think it also links into probably in a modern day setup is the challenge that GMs or sporting directors or directors of football have of closing that gap between what them and their coaches want and then finding a player that fits that. Because
yeah,
if I'm the coach and I'm being dictated to what players come into my environment, and there's not close alignment to my football sporting director, we could be so far apart.
yes, yeah,
Whereas what you're alluding to there, in terms of actually spending time with people and seeing those things, because you're able to be on the ground and feel that, it
yeah,
allows you to make the decisions easier. So actually, at those top levels, I appreciate like your Klopps and Pep and people like that probably can't go and spend a load of time talking to
right.
players and stuff, but the job for them is to make sure they're so closely aligned to their director of football, sport and director, that I implicitly trust what you're giving me because you know how I work. And
Yes,
I what you don't want is what Chelsea are doing at the minute, much to my pleasure, of constant changing of managers and whatnot, which then is going to bring just disalignment into what players are entering the environment and how I need them to act to make my environment work.
yeah, and it's going to be interesting even for me, because right now I am the sporting director and the head coach. So obviously, unless I'm having a psychotic episode, I'm aligned with what I'm looking for. But when we move to the professional level, when we move up, we will split the job. So we will hire a sporting director or a head coach. We're still conversations as to whether I'll do one or the other. You know what I mean? I think we have an idea, but that's an ownership decision. But we will at some point be working two people to try and figure out the right person for the team. Um, and so again, those conversations are really, really important. And look, I'm not signing guys to contracts right now, so I don't have a worry about how much we can pay them and how much the salary cap might be, and this, because we're not there yet. But I understand it where I might want player X, but the sporting director says like we can't afford him, or so we've got this other player for you instead that's similar in style or whatever. Um, that is a challenge, man. I do agree. And I understand when coaches, especially coaches that are getting let go, you know what I mean, where they're trying to maybe explain away why they weren't as successful as they had hoped they would be. And so, look, you expect me to play, but you don't even let me pick the players that I get to play with. You know, um,
Yeah.
and so it's a tricky job. That is a tricky job.
I think it comes down to diligence. For me as a sporting director, diligence of what coach that I'm going to employ to make
Yeah,
sure that ultimately he aligns to my vision, because otherwise I'm the one that's going to have to sack him. So I might have to forego a really top coach for someone that's really closely aligned, because that allows us to work better. And
yeah,
then real due diligence in the players that are going to come in, because we know that it's going to align with how we want to do stuff. I know there was a story with the Seattle Seahawks and Pete Carroll, who during the first, I think, week of training camp when he very first got there, he they went through a real high number of tryouts during that season, just kind of constant churn. But first meeting, he told everyone to get up and swap places, and essentially the staff just stood in the room and watched to see those that got up and moved, and those that just sat and didn't. Those that just sat and kind of, I think, disobeyed, they were gone straight away.
wow,
And Pete Carroll's basically worked on the premise: if I can't trust them to get up and move to somewhere else when they've just been asked to do a simple task, how can I ask them to do
right,
this? And he worked off the fact that he'd failed at the Patriots by trying to do stuff that wasn't authentic to him. So now he
yeah,
was going to be authentic and get players
yeah,
that fit that, regardless of
yeah,
salary and whatnot. And listen, obviously it was a positive story towards the end, but it's just interesting that that was the reflection he had when he went from the Patriots to USC, that actually he should have placed more emphasis of aligning to his values more than he
yeah,
did than appeasing the individual.
yeah. I agree, and I think some of that comes in coaching. Age maybe not necessarily as much as experience. You get to a point where I think at the end of the day, you might convince me to, I don't know, tuck the fullback in when we build or keep them wide when we build. We can have a conversation about the tactics and the X's and O's, but I'm not going to bend on the other values that I think are really important. Whereas if I'm being 100% honest, when I was younger, I would have ignored every red flag about a player because he was a really talented player, you know, and got burned every single time I did it. I've learned the hard. I've touched the stove many, many a time. You know what I mean? Because you just learn the hard way. But now what I learn is, I like what I like. I am who I am. This is what's important to me, and that's how I'm going to coach. And I've also gotten to a point where if you don't like how I coach, fair enough. Just send me on my way. I'll find another job. I'm not over worried about that part of it. It doesn't mean I don't want it to happen, but I don't sit around and let the stresses of that keep me up at night anymore. Um,
Perfect. I think that I'm conscious of time, and it's probably a perfect point to finish on. So, one last question for me, which is, if I was to ask your players or the people you work with to describe you in 3 words, how would you hope to be described?
mm. Honest, I think would be the first one. I think every complaint of every player that I've spoken to, and I say, "How's it going with whatever team they're playing on?" They just feel I don't feel like they're telling me the truth, and so I want to be honest, even if honest is direct and maybe sometimes over direct. The joke in the team is don't ask Mike the question if you don't want to know the answer, because I will tell you. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means that your left foot's not good enough, or whatever the deal is. So I would hope for honest. Um, I would actually hope, secondly, that they would. I show the players respect. My philosophy as a coach, what I call it is reflecting value. When I want to reflect value, the value that I see in you, I want you to see in yourself. So I'm just trying to show it to you. And so I try and show everybody respect as I can. And then I hope that at some point, because of these things, we'll be successful. So I would like to be considered to be successful as well. That's certainly bottom of the list of the three, though. I think the other two are more important.
Perfect. Listen, Mike, really appreciate your time. I'm sure, like me, you've gained a few Fort Worth fans, and everyone will be keeping an eye out for you. But yeah, sorry, Fort Wayne fans, and
Yeah,
everyone keeping an eye out for you. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. We'll catch up again soon.
sure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Sports Initiative podcast with me, Michael Wright. Please remember to follow us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram at the Sports Initiative Podcast, and share this podcast with friends and family. I'll see you next week.